am glad I joined the organization because it's given us an eye and an earful and everything else as to some of the things that change the nature of where we all live and play and work and hopefully have cohesive neighborhoods. And so it's, we came to realize that in Monroeville, there is an entire municipality, and of course that's divided up in areas where we live, residential zones, and commerce and business, and all of those things are put into an order for their least restrictive environment, where they really allow you to have proper things and you don't have a gas station next to a home. There are zoning laws that say certain activities belong in certain zones. The furthest away you can imagine are the industrial zones, and what we came to learn about was back in 2018, we were noticing that the zoning ordinance in Monroeville had been a long time in updating. To be specific, 1984 was the last update. And there were many things to be changed, as you can imagine. One of the things that we had a keen eye for was keeping industrial processes in industrial zones. So we had a quality of neighborhoods in life that didn't expose us to industry things like air pollution and groundwater pollution and the like. So in 2018, we were able, as a group of people, to come up in front of our municipal council here. All of us have council members. There's 7 wards in Monroeville. And we pointed out that there was a out-of-date ability to say where oil and gas operations should occur. And in order to keep within the law that governs over all the municipalities, that law is referred to as the Municipal Planning Code, we called it to the attention that you need to take these oil and gas operations that were left from 1984 when all of the wells were vertical, and you need to not have them in every zoning district. You can't possibly do that. You would be sued in court. Please put them in an industrial zoning district. And you jumped right in here, Dave, because it was rather back and forth that we had to do, and we had some people come to our aid to help us explain those things. And sure enough, the council agreed to designate by ordinance number 2669 to allow those operations in their proper place, which means heavy industrial things like oil and gas operations belong in an industrial zone. And we have industrial zones here. They're referred to by alphabetical numbers. Can get into that later. But that has been the case for 5 years. They have been in the proper areas. Then in last year, we became aware of an update in the zoning ordinance. Didn't become aware of it too soon. It was almost the end of the year into September when I realized that, oh, there are proposed changes to a lot of things. First of all, the Route 22 corridor and the medical areas to overlay in areas that maybe are not functioning, like a North American Martyrs Church and the AHN network. But also, there were changes that they weren't available to us. And I think somebody here in the back might realize that I came to his office, that we have an actual great deal of gratitude to Paul Weldon. Paul, you met with me, and you are the zoning officer of Monroeville. And
thank you for being here.
I was able to look over his shoulder and see that oil and gas had been moved out of these industrial zones that have been the status quo for the last 5 years. And that is why we are by this time serving on the board of directors to Protect PT. And Protect PT is about 8 years old next month?
8 years.
8 years going. Started from your living room. We were alarmed about that. We wondered why that was. And I'll leave it there. I don't think I need to go any farther at this point. Dave, anything to add?
I think, I mean, we can get into the presentation, and we can certainly, we'll all be here to answer questions and talk to you and help with this subject. So we have a lot of experience going back over the years with it.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just introduce Jillian Graber to you, the Executive Director of Protect PT. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We are live streaming this for people that weren't able to be here tonight because we did get a couple requests. So thank you to those who could make it tonight. And
No,
Go
so
ahead.
that's not a microphone for the room. That's for
Right.
the live stream for people who are
Right.
watching on Zoom. So they can speak up.
I'll try to project. I'll use my outside voice. Tiffany's going to bring around fact sheets. And that really tells you the gist of what we're going to cover tonight. But really, we're here to talk about not only fracking, but the expansion of the landfill in Monroeville. And this is just a little bit about us, and I think that maybe Lois went over a little bit about this, but we are Protect Penn Trafford, but we protect a lot more than Penn Trafford at this point. We work in all over Westmoreland and Allegheny County, and we have really some simple goals to educate, empower, and engage. And so that's what we work every day to do. And so we're here tonight because the Monroeville zoning ordinance allows fracking and other industrial opportunities right now in industrial zones only, which is where it should be. Fracking is a heavy industrial process, and therefore, if you have to put it somewhere, the best place to put it is in the industrial zone. But there's a newly proposed ordinance that is happening right now in Monroeville, which allows for new oil and gas infrastructure and to happen in the landfill, which it currently does not let happen. Conservancy zones, which are all over Monroeville, and in addition to that, the existing industrial structures. So on your fact sheet, we have little blow-ups on the front of the two, side by side, what it looks like now and what it looks like. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. One after another. Flip it around again to the front. There you go. So the map on the top, we're going to talk about this, is what it is like right now. The map on the bottom is what they're proposing to do. And on the back side, you'll see the entire Monroeville map as they're proposing it to happen. And not only will these changes bring industrial fracking closer to municipal zones like residential zones, recreational, commercial, and schools, but it will allow heavy industrial activities near where people work, play, and recreate. And so changes like this can bring really an impact to community members by increasing air and water pollution that's harmful to human health. And you know, we're not here to tell you whether fracking should or should not happen. We're here to say that human health should be protected, and there are certain things that we can do to protect human health the best way possible. And in particular with children and the elderly, because they're, you know, we call them vulnerable populations, because they're particularly vulnerable to air pollution in particular. The proposed zoning ordinance also increases the size of the current zoning containing the Monroeville municipal landfill, which we find a little shocking, I think would be one way to put it, because, you know, it really takes out a bunch of conservancy district and allows for the expansion of the landfill. And I don't know if anybody has seen how much the expansion of the landfill is going on right now. It gets higher and higher and higher. And after it gets so high, then eventually they'll have to expand it. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason why it's expanding at such an enormous rate, and quite frankly, an unsustainable rate. And that all goes back to fracking and why that's happening. So this proposed zoning ordinance will increase the size of this municipal landfill.
Excuse me?
Yes.
You're saying the landfill's expanding because of fracking?
Yes, that's one of the reasons why the landfill is expanding at a much higher rate than normal.
How is that?
We're going to talk about that. Yep, we'll get into that. And actually, this is not the only presentation we're going to give. We're also coming back on April 1st. And is that going to be upstairs, or is that going to be in the same room? Okay, same room, April 1st. We're going to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the human health impacts, why, the why of why fracking impacts the landfill, and I can give you a little bit more information about that tonight. But really, this is going to expand the zone and into these now existing conservation districts or zones, and bring the landfill closer to residential areas. And so, does everybody know what fracking is? Is there anybody that doesn't know? I'm going to see if this video will work. And if it'll actually play. It's not playing the sound.
Might narrate it. That's a slice of the.
Natural gas. This gas deep underground lie stores of once inaccessible natural gas. This gas was likely formed over millions of years as layers of decaying organisms were exposed to intense heat and pressure under the Earth's crust. There's a technology called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, that can extract this natural gas, potentially powering us for decades to come. So how does fracking work, and why is it a source of such heated controversy? A fracking site can be anywhere with natural gas, from a remote desert to several hundred feet from your backyard. It starts out with a long vertical hole, known as a wellbore, drilled down through layers of sediment. When the well reaches 2,500 to 3,000 meters, it's at its kickoff point, where it can begin the process of horizontal drilling. It turns 90 degrees and extends horizontally for about 1.5 kilometers through a compressed black layer called the shale rock formation. A specialized perforating gun is then lowered and fired, creating a series of small inch-long holes that burst through the well's casing into the rock layer. About 3 to 4 months after the initial drilling, the well is ready for fracking to begin. Fracking fluid is pumped down into the well at a pressure so high it cracks the shale rock, creating fractures through which the trapped gas and oil can escape. The fluid itself is more than 90% water. The rest is made up of concentrated chemical additives. These vary depending on the specific characteristics of the fracking site, but usually fall into 3 categories. Acids for clearing debris and dissolving minerals, friction-reducing compounds to create a slippery form of water known as slick water, and disinfectant to prevent bacteria growth. Sand or clay is also mixed into the water to prop open the fissures so the gas and oil can keep leaking out even after the pressure is released. It's estimated that all of fracking's intense pumping and flushing uses an average of 3 to 6 million gallons of water per well. That's actually not a lot compared to agriculture, power plants, or even golf course maintenance, but it can have a notable impact on local water supply. And disposing of used fracking water is also an issue. Along with the trapped gas that's pumped up to the surface, millions of gallons of flowback liquid come gushing up. This liquid, containing contaminants like radioactive material, salts, heavy metals, and hydrocarbons, needs to be stored and disposed of. That's usually done in pits on site, in deep wells, or off-site at water treatment facilities. Another option is to recycle the flowback liquid, but the recycling process can actually increase levels of contamination since the water is more toxic with each use. Wells are typically encased in steel and cement to prevent contaminants from leaking into groundwater, but any negligence or fracking-related accidents can have devastating effects. Fracturing directly into underground water, hazardous underground seepage and leakage, and inadequate treatment and disposal of highly toxic wastewater can potentially contaminate drinking water around a fracking site. There's also concern about the threat of earthquakes and damaged infrastructure from pressure and wastewater injection. Links between fracking and increased seismic activity leave unresolved questions about long-term pressure imbalances that might be happening deep beneath our feet. Fracking's biggest controversy, though, is happening above the ground. The general consensus is that burning natural gas is better for the environment than burning coal, since the gas collected from fracking emits only half the carbon dioxide as coal per unit of energy. The pollution caused by the fracking itself, though, isn't negligible. Methane that leaks out during the drilling and pumping process is many times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. Some scientists argue that methane eventually dissipates, so has a relatively low long-term impact. But a greater question hangs in the air. Does fracking take time, money, and research away from the development of cleaner, renewable energy sources? Natural gas is non-renewable, and the short-run economic interests supporting fracking may fall short in the face of global climate change. Experts are still examining fracking's overarching effects. Although modern fracking has been around since the 1940s, it's boomed in the last few decades as other sources of natural gas decrease, the costs of non-renewable energies rise, and cutting-edge technologies make it so accessible. But many countries and regions have already banned fracking in response to environmental concerns. It's undeniable that fracking has reshaped the energy landscape around the world. But for what long-term benefit and at what cost?
Okay. Now, you had asked earlier, why is that impacting the landfill expansion? So they were talking about the fracking process, and now you know a little bit more about it. That video is available online on YouTube. So if you couldn't hear it, you can watch it again on YouTube. But essentially, when they said 3 to 5 million gallons of water, that was back 10 years ago. Now it's more like 15 to 20 million gallons of water per fracking well. And they're drilling a hole, right? They're drilling a hole down, but then they're going over 2-3 miles. So what's coming up is solid waste, and that is considered, because of a federal rule called RCRA, it's considered non-hazardous waste, or it's considered residual waste. Well, the landfill takes residual waste, and if you're talking about 3-4 miles of drill cuttings, we're talking about tons and tons and tons of residual waste. This is taking up an enormous amount of space at the landfill. What's more, they talked about radioactivity in the water. The radioactivity lives in the rock. The water becomes radioactive because it is interacting with the rock. And actually, it's the sedimentation that becomes radioactive in the water. And so that can linger in the water. But what science is finding is that the drill cuttings can be radioactive. They can contain radium-226 and 228, which that's radium. It's a bone-seeking type of a radium. So it is going to get into your bones and give you cancer, bone cancer. And that's what we're seeing. So not only are we seeing hazards from the waste itself and how it's being disposed of, but we're also seeing that it is leaving these landfills to have such an increase in expansion that it's not sustainable. And on one well pad, you're talking about 5 to 10, sometimes 20 wells per pad. So we're not just talking about one, we're talking about lots of them per site.
20 horizontal wells, one vertical and 20.
That's right, per site. So no, actually multiple vertical and multiple horizontal, yeah. So does that kind of answer your question? And
Yeah. So
okay.
for the landfill, when they put trash in, they cover it with soil, and I guess they would probably use some of that, which would probably be okay if it wasn't radioactive soil. Right?
That's right. If it wasn't radioactive soil, it would be, perfectly fine to cover it with that. But we've been in other communities, and Ross Draver has a lot of problems with this because of the fracking. And we're going to take 2 questions, and I want to move on. Yes, sir.
When is this proposed ordinance up for a vote?
We're going to go over that in the presentation, sir.
So is the landfill approved to take frack water and waste from?
So the landfill, because of this rule called RCRA, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, this is a federal law that gives a special loophole for oil and gas operations, and it treats oil and gas waste or drill cuttings and produced water as non-hazardous or non-radioactive waste. Even though there's evidence that the EPA has known since 1970 that oil and gas waste is in fact radioactive. And they chose to not act appropriately.
They were disposing of those in deep wells.
They're disposing of the liquid in deep wells. The solid, though, goes to the municipal landfill.
There's a problem also with disposing of deep wells.
Yes.
Because that fluid that goes into those wells end up causing additional cracks,
Yeah,
and those cracks generate mini quakes.
that's right.
And that has been proven by 2 cases at Livermore Labs and in Albuquerque, San Diego
Yes.
National Labs. But all they were doing is disposing of liquid, rat waste liquid in deep wells.
And they're disposing of it here as well. So they're disposing of it in Plum right now. And we're gonna definitely get more of this discussion going. I love that there's discussion going right now. I wanna try to get through the rest of the slides and then we can have more of that because we have plenty of time for discussion. And so this is a full map of Monroeville. And so the purple and this like maroon color down below, that's what it was blown up on the front of your page. So that's the industrial zone, and then the proposed expanded landfill zone. You can see, if you look at those pictures side by side, the dark green on the top picture is where the landfill is now. The purple is where they want to expand it to. So all the areas around the landfill that are now conservancy are going to be landfill. And then there's still other conservancy districts you can see throughout Monroeville that could be targets for potential fracking pads. So this could be any and everywhere, anywhere there's conservancy. Does anyone else know what else is in conservancy?
Wildlife.
Wildlife and our parks where we recreate. Yeah, so really not compatible with an industrial use. Yes, sir.
In the side-by-side, the area that is currently sort of a bright blue, which according to that was a special use land, what is that land currently?
That's the
Before
yeah.
and the side-by-side, the area.
This and
that's
this?
now the purple.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, so this is M2 industrial zone in Monroeville currently. So that's where, today, as we speak, and basically, if nothing changes, if we keep the status quo, this M2 industrial zone and a little bit up here, there's a few others, is where we, back in 2018 or late 2017, had Monroeville Council voted to only allow, under conditional use, fracking in those areas. Before, it was actually under conditional use in every zone of Monroeville.
Yeah.
But we got them to change it to just these zones, M2 industrial, and that is what is proposed to change, and that's why we're here tonight.
Yeah.
What did it for them? Why do they want to change this? There has to be something in there.
Yeah. So we're gonna take all the rest of the questions at the end, and definitely I'm sure that there are a lot of reasons why they want to change this, but let's talk a little bit about why this is going to be impactful to you and your family. So the expansion of the landfill will worsen air quality. So the landfill, not only are there trucks coming to and from the landfill, those are diesel vehicles, but also we've seen at other municipal landfills like the Westmoreland Sanitary Landfill, who's been accepting fracking waste for the last 10 years, the air quality is very poor around the landfill. And so, in fact, some of the poorest in our region, because not only are they getting the downwind from the Mon Valley, because they're in the Mon Valley, and all the steel mills are going, all the pollution from the steel mills are going that way, but also the landfill is creating a huge hazard to the people there. And so we see that has expanded, and we don't want the same thing to happen here. This can threaten groundwater nearby, and this is through leachate. So leachate is basically garbage juice, or it's the water that when it rains goes through the landfill and creates waste. So, and because we've had a lot more rain due to things like erratic weather, which, you know, we've all seen this erratic weather, but this increase of rain is increasing the leachate. And we're finding that the leachate is actually very similar to fracking waste or fracking water or produced water, because again, the landfill has been accepting the drill cuttings. So that water goes through the drill cuttings and it comes out to be very similar to fracking produced water. And so there's an increase in the solid waste pollution and litter in nearby areas. We see, I don't know, last time you've driven through Pitcairn up 130, but there is so much waste on the roads. It's crazy. In fact, I think Lois made a complaint to the DEP because they're not allowed to just put waste, garbage on the road. And there's mud on the road, and that mud could be laced with also the drill cuttings. We've seen that in Rostraver. So this is another problem. And so then increasing the fracking areas brings this industrial process closer to you and your family in residential, recreational, commercial, and school zones. And unconventional gas development commences in your community. Residents will be exposed to many different harms due to the different stages of this industrial process in close proximity to your homes. This is actually a picture of a drill rig right behind a school in Butler. They actually painted the drill rig to match the school playground, which is pretty disastrous in my opinion as a mom. But this will impact your health because industrial development can affect air quality, water quality, like we talked about. Exposure to air pollution can cause respiratory problems. It can cause nervous system impacts, blood disorders, cancer, and birth defects, and it can harm developing fetuses. And there's a huge body of research that talks about how fracking impacts human health. In addition, water pollution from leachate leaks and other leaks can expose residents to many chemicals known to be carcinogens, known to be cancer-causing chemicals. This disrupts the endocrine system, affects the brain, kidneys, nervous system, immune system, cardiovascular disease, respiratory and gastrointestinal systems. So there's actually a study going on right now at Pitt with the Department of Health for Pennsylvania and University of Pittsburgh to study all the instances of cancer, childhood cancer, which were rare childhood cancers that we're seeing a boom in these cancers in Washington and Westmoreland counties, right where fracking has been happening for the last decade. So this is alarming. In addition to all of that, residents are also exposed to noise and light, which can be a problem if you're trying to sleep, because these are operations that are happening 24/7. So it goes on all the time. We've had lots of complaints in Penn Township with the noise and the light. It is so disruptive to people that live near this, and it can cause a lot of problems. So it can cause, sleep disruption, which can cause stress. It can also then lead to diseases and diabetes, things like that. And it can just really be unpleasant to live near this.
24/7 just while they're fracking.
24/7 while they're drilling and fracking. Yep.
And not after when they're just.
Not after when they're producing, that's right. But they can come back and stimulate the well or refrac the well at any point. And this can happen over several years because they can get up to 3 years to drill a well or to drill all their wells on their pad. And that can lead to increased stress and decreased quality of life. So what does the ordinance change mean? That by changing the zoning map, the council is changing where this industrial process can happen. And that's going to allow the council to expand the area where heavy industrial activities can take place. Previous zoning reduced conflict by keeping similar uses together. So that's really the proper way to do zoning, to keep things that go together. And I like to say, you wouldn't want me to put Kennywood in my backyard. You'd be really mad if you were my neighbor and I decided I wanted to put a big Ferris wheel in my backyard, right? Because this is a big problem. It's going to cause you a lot of disturbance. It's going to cause disturbance to your neighbors. It's going to cause light, noise, pollution from all the generators that are, driving that Ferris wheel 24/7, traffic. In this case, we're talking about a triaxle truck traffic and things like that. And Jim, did you want to go ahead with the slide? And because I think this is your slide that I'm taking. Sorry about that.
Take it away.
I didn't introduce him.
Yeah.
That's okay. My name is Jim Cirilano. I'm the community advocate for Protect PT. And what Jillian was talking about with respect to this slide and with respect to the change in the zoning map is that the purpose of the map and the purpose of zoning is to keep like activities together. The previous zoning map was limiting the places where fracking could occur to a certain industrial districts that Dave pointed out to you on the map that were very limited, and they were basically away from all of the other kinds of uses. The other uses were residential, park uses, that sort of thing. The second thing that a zoning map does, and zoning does, that is very important, is it protects the economic interests of people who have purchased properties for their homes, for instance, or for their businesses, or whatever they may have purchased them for. And the reason for that is you go and you buy a house with certain expectations that the characteristics of this neighborhood where you've purchased are going to remain the same over time, and that in 20 years, this residential area that you've bought your house in, or that you've bought your property in, is going to be pretty much the same as when you bought the house. Well, if you change the map and you allow this kind of industrial activity to promulgate around the entire area, basically, of Monroeville, that can impact the values of the property of people who have bought their houses 20, 30 years ago, and they have an expectation that they're not going to be anywhere near industrial activity because they didn't buy that. They didn't buy that deal. They didn't buy that property. The terms of the deal have changed, and that's what we're trying to prevent here. Now, earlier on, I don't remember whether it was Dave or whether it was Jillian that said that, but oil and gas is what's called a conditional use. Sometimes they're called special exceptions. And that sounds like it's some sort of restrictive sort of thing that would only be allowed on certain conditions. Well, that's really deceiving. It's a deceiving term. It's a term of art in law, and some of those terms can be deceiving if you don't understand them. But I'm here to tell you what a conditional use is. Means that it is permitted so long as it is not more unreasonably dangerous than it otherwise would be. So a conditional use for a gas well, for an unconventional gas well, there are certain regulations that apply to unconventional gas wells that perhaps are in this new ordinance and certainly are in the past ordinances. But if those are all met, then that gas well could be placed anywhere where it's permitted by the new map. Likewise with the landfill, it is also a conditional use, and even though it may not have expanded to the extent that it is being permitted, if the application is submitted and it is approved, which it has to be approved if it meets the criteria in the ordinance, then it will certainly expand. You may be told that there's no plans to expand it currently. You may be told that there's no plans to frack in these other places where fracking hitherto had not been permitted. But I can guarantee you, if there's an economic interest for someone, and that economic interest is great enough, if it is not prohibited by the map, if it is not prohibited by the zoning, then it's going to go there. Yeah?
Which specific areas are you talking about that are gonna change for the fracking?
In the former map, the fracking was permitted only in the industrial areas, which are in the very darkest color on your map. Dave had pointed them out earlier. I don't know how to get backwards on this thing. But that's where they were permitted. The setbacks were 500 feet from which is the state setback from a well bore. But in the industrial zones, it was so limited that minimal setback didn't make any difference. The proposal is, I believe now, to increase the setback.
Meaning that no fracking could occur as things stand now.
Only in the industrial use.
Correct. I just wanted to clarify that. So fracking would not be able to happen the way that things stand now. The way that the vote potentially could go.
Outside of the M2 industrial zones, it is permissible as a conditional use, as Jim was just talking about, and the meanings that go behind that. In the M2 industrial, that's what we, as a group, brought to council and council voted on.
You're saying that that's gonna change?
That's gonna change.
In the proposed ordinance, That would change.
How do we stop it?
Well, that's what we're here to talk about. We have plenty more to talk to you about.
What is the change?
So the change is the areas where fracking could occur. Currently, right now, listen very carefully, fracking can only occur in M2 industrial, which is those darker the very darkest areas on the existing map. Okay, that's going to change. It's going to be based on setbacks, and the setbacks, while larger, will enable fracking to take place in more and more varied areas.
And anywhere on the green, anywhere in the green, in addition to the dark areas, on the big map, anything that's green is conservation, and anything that's dark is either the industrial or the landfill. And go ahead. Yeah.
I think Lois and I have a point on that too. I just want to say here and keep things moving. But if you look at the map, the current map of the current zoning map, in addition to the green, and I'm not sure if this was an issue at the time it was printed, and Lois can add to this. But if you look at, say, if you understand where Monroeville Park West is, if you can find that on the map, and I could show you up here if it was up here, it is actually colored in yellow. So that would actually be another conservation area, another green, what we call now a conservancy zone. But for some reason on this map, it's colored in yellow, which if you look at the key, if the key is on your information sheet, it would be, that yellow color would be a residential, but it's really Monroeville Park West. And did you want to add
And
about?
I will show you personally. It might make it easier for me to actually point it to you if you want me to. But the landfill, the huge area that you see of the landfill is the proposed area.
Yeah.
Currently industrial, but it is proposed in the landfill and in the conservancy areas, which is all that green space that includes your parks and buffer areas between neighborhoods, and that is in green.
Okay.
So I can show you.
Well, in the green area, in the
Yes.
That's the
Okay.
proposal to put it in the conservancy.
I know
area.
that there are a lot more questions.
I want to let her to be able to get through with
Yeah.
it, 'cause I'm sorry.
Because we're live streaming this for people that couldn't be here, so I want to make sure that we get through the presentation. And then certainly we'll be available for questions after. We're here until I think 8 o'clock, and actually the library is here until 8:45 till we have to leave. So we'll get to everybody's questions. I know it's a lot to take in, and that's why we invite everybody back again on the 1st to learn more. But really, we're just saying let's protect the community by maintaining the status quo, right? Let's just keep it the way it is now by putting it where it belongs, which is an industrial activity in an industrial zone. Okay, and by doing that, it will preserve your investment-backed expectation, and it will preserve your property rights as you see they are right now. And so the Monroeville zoning ordinance changes, so there's a procedure in which that this has to happen, okay? And somebody asked this question before. So a draft on the new ordinance has been made. There was a paid consultant that the municipality paid last year to go through the whole entire zoning ordinance, and that was passed on to Municipal Council of Monroeville. And on March 9th, the council made the draft ordinance available to the public and advertised a public hearing. So 45 days prior to the public hearing, ordinance draft undergoes a review by the Allegheny County Planning for recommendation. So the county has to also approve this. But keep in mind too, the county, as long as it meets the standards of what's called the Municipal Planning Code, or MPC, then it will be accepted by the county. But you could feel free to call your county reps and let them know about how these changes are going to impact you. And so after that 45 days, then there's actually a public hearing. So we know the public hearing is going to be on April 4th. So mark your calendars, April 4th at 7 p.m. at the Monroeville Municipal Building. And then, so as it is right now, there are lots of changes to the map, which we saw. There are lots of changes to the text of the ordinance as well, but that could be better too. The text could be better also. And so we're working on both things, but any substantive changes from here on out will require additional hearings and advertisement of those hearings. And so council has to vote on a final ordinance. And so those are the procedures of how to change the ordinance. And they're going through that right now. March 9th was the last meeting. And April 4th will be the next meeting.
March 9th is when they voted.
When they voted to, okay, I'm sorry.
To
March 9th
advertise.
is when they voted to
When they made
advertise.
it, public, available to the public.
Okay, so what are the next steps? So show up for the hearing. That is the number one thing that you can do to tell council how you feel about this. If this is not what you would like to have happen, if you want the status quo to be maintained as it is right now, show up and let them know. Don't change the map. That happens at 7 o'clock at the municipal council. And so that means that the table, the use table, and everything associated with this industrial process related to fracking will just be kept to the industrial zones as it is right now. And so maintaining that status quo is really important. And also adding protections for public safety and public health. And so adding these protections, which is the how-to. So there's two parts of a zoning ordinance. There's the where and the how. The where is the map. The how is the text version of the ordinance. And it talks about all kinds of things. And Jim has actually helped many communities write some ordinances with some really protective language, increasing things like bond amounts, putting more of the burden on the operator to prove that they're not going to impact your public health, and all these things that are really important that the industry just doesn't have to do right now, that are really important to have changed. And so then they'll have to advertise more hearings if they are going to change that text. And so you need to be up on this issue and well informed. We're going to have another meeting on April 1st, and we're going to go into more of the nitty-gritty of how fracking impacts your health.
Is that here?
That's here, right here. Mm-hmm.
What time? 10 a.m. on a Saturday, April the 1st.
Yeah, so if people could not be here tonight, they can come on Saturday. If you are here tonight, we're going to talk about things like how to prepare your testimony. So, if you've ever gotten up in front of the council before, it can be a little nerve-wracking. I get nervous, and I speak to people for a living. I get nervous talking to everybody. But if you have a prepared statement, it can be a lot better. So we can help you prepare a statement. You should, and there's a lot of things you should do in order to prepare a statement. We're going to have tips for you to be able to do that. We're also going to make those available on our website. We also have yard signs that you can get for free here tonight. They're out in the hall. And then the most important thing that you need to remember is to attend the public hearing. And one other thing you can do, if you see people in your neighborhood that are here, that's awesome. But I bet there's a lot of your neighbors who are not here. And so tell your neighbors. You may have gotten a postcard in the mail. Maybe that's why you're here. We also flyered a couple neighborhoods nearest the landfill. And so those are places that we wanted to make sure we got the word out. But tell your neighbor. Tell your neighbor how important this is. And then, of course, you can become a member of Protect PT because at the end of the day, this could really impact you and your family. And this is just kind of the beginning because let's say nothing happens. Let's say they make the changes and nobody's happy about it. There are other things we can do with our legal advocacy arm of our organization. So what we try to do is try to make the best impact as possible and really try to give the people their democracy. I mean, this is your council. These are your elected officials, and they are supposed to be serving you. And so we want to make sure that that happens. And the best way for that to happen is for you to raise your voice and let them know how you feel.
How do we become a member of Protect PT?
Yep, so you can become a member you can scan that on your phone, or you can go to our website, and it's just protectpt.info/member. Okay? Yes?
The Monroeville Council is supposed to be representing us and taking care of us. What are they getting out of this project?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, and I'm going to repeat it for the people that are listening that may be on the live stream. What is the Monroeville Council getting out of this? Well, I can tell you just from my experience in Penn Township, municipalities are under tremendous amount of pressure from the industry to allow this activity to happen, okay? I can tell you right now with much certainty that there are oil and gas leases in Monroeville around and in the landfill. Those leases have been executed by drilling companies that are actively drilling in Penn Township right now. And those leases are untouched assets that company wants to touch. They want to get that gas. And so they are going to do whatever they possibly can to get that gas. And this is one way they can do it. Change where it can happen. And so the municipality is under a tremendous amount of pressure to do that. There also may be other influences. I mean, we really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We really don't know what their motivations are, but what their motivations should be is protecting and serving the community. Sir?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Weldon, our zoning director, whose idea was to change it from industrial into something else.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question, and I'm not sure if you can answer that, sir, but you could try. So the question was, what you're going to ask Mr. Weldon, who proposed the changes? How did the changes come about? I'm going to try to switch the microphone.
Is that a fair question for him?
Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to, I mean, you don't have to answer it if, would you like to?
He knows everything that goes on in that building.
Sorry. You can go ahead. We'll just, we can stop the recording. Can we stop the recording?
So what happened is, I've only been in Monroeville for about 6 years now, and when I was tasked with the new zoning board,